Dr. Nightechoes.
I found a strange little shack deep in the northern woods. It did not look like it was made of logs or stone. The walls were a dusty gray color and looked like layers of dried smoke pressed tight together. I walked up to the side of the house and put my bare hand flat against the wall. The surface vibrated under my palms. Suddenly, a soft voice whispered my full name right into my ear. It sounded exactly like my own mother, but she was thousands of miles away. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The air was incredibly thick and heavy. It felt like walking into a room full of invisible cobwebs. The moment I closed the door, the sound started. Thousands of voices were speaking in the dark all at once. I heard people praying, crying, and screaming for help. They were the final words of every hiker who had ever gone missing in these woods. The house was a trap that collected the sounds of dying people. Suddenly, my throat went completely dry. The air in my chest was pulled violently out of my mouth, like a vacuum cleaner sucking at my lips. The room was trying to steal my last breath to add it to the noisy walls. I knew that if I exhaled one more time, I would die right there. I clamped my mouth shut and pinched my nose hard with my fingers. My lungs burned and my head started to spin from the lack of air. I threw my body against the front door, burst out into the dirt yard, and tumbled onto the grass. Behind me, the entire shack let out a soft sigh and collapsed into a flat pile of gray ash. I am back in my apartment now, but the silence is terrifying. Whenever a room gets too quiet, I find myself holding my breath until my chest hurts. I am terrified that if I take one deep breath in the dark, the quiet will reach down my throat and pull the life right out of me. I was walking across a high, flat mountain field where there were no trees to block the sun. The afternoon sky was completely clear. I looked down at the bright grass to watch my own shadow as I walked. Something was very wrong with it. It was not moving at the same speed as my body. It was lagging far behind me, dragging its feet like it was tired. Then I saw it reach its black hand out to touch the trunk of a pine tree I had passed 2 minutes ago. It was not a trick of the light. The shadow was a living thing, and it was eating my connection to the real world. Suddenly, a terrible, freezing cold hit my legs. I looked down at my own hands. My skin was turning clear, like glass. I could see the white bones inside my fingers. My body was becoming thin and see-through, as if someone were rubbing a pencil drawing off a piece of paper. The thing attached to my feet was erasing me from existence. I looked up and saw a wide area of bright, blinding sunlight near the edge of the rocks. I forced my heavy, fading legs to move and sprinted straight into the hottest glare of the sun. The bright light hit me hard, and I felt a sharp, ripping pain at the bottom of my feet. The dark thing let out a faint shiver and dissolved into the light. I made it back to the town, but I am not the same. I do not have a shadow anymore. When I stand under a bright street lamp, there is nothing on the ground behind me. There is only a small, pitch-black hole in the dirt where my shadow used to be, and it shivers whenever I look straight at it. Sometimes I catch myself looking down before every step, hoping to see my shadow return. The ground stays empty, and the little black hole seems to wait for me instead. I was hiking alone through a thick, dark part of the forest. The large trees looked strange. Their trunks were covered in soft gray lumps that looked like weeping sores. Clear water was slowly dripping from them onto the moss. I walked over and touched one of the soft spots with my thumb. Instantly, a terrible feeling hit my mind. I remembered the exact day my parents left me behind as a child. It was a horrible, painful memory that I had not thought about in 20 years. The forest was not a normal group of plants. It was a monster that stole bad memories from people. It used human sadness and pain like fertilizer to make itself grow. I looked at a large lump on the tree right in front of me. The bark had shifted into the exact shape of my own face, and it was crying. The gray lump was pulsing up and down, matching the speed of my own heartbeat. The tree was reaching into my brain and stealing my past. It wanted to wipe my mind completely clean until I was just an empty shell. I pulled my heavy machete from my belt. I swung the blade hard, chopping into the crying face on the tree trunk. A thick, gray liquid sprayed across my clothes. It smelled like burnt wires and old, dusty tears. I kept swinging the blade, cutting a path through the bleeding branches until the woods opened up. I made it back to my car, but I am terrified. My mind feels strangely light and empty now. I know that a big piece of my own life is gone forever, stuck to the bark of those horrible trees. Sometimes I try to remember that childhood day again. All I can picture now is that tree, crying with my face instead of its own. I set up my tent in a deep, hidden canyon. The night was dead silent, but around midnight, the dirt under my sleeping pad started to shake. It was a slow, heavy thumping, like a massive heart beating deep inside the earth. I stepped outside into the dark to see what was happening. The thick roots of the pine trees were shifting on top of the soil. They were slowly sliding around like giant worms. I realized the trees were not normal plants. Their roots were feelers for something huge and awake underneath the ground. It was using them to taste the vibrations of my body. I went completely stiff, but my hands were shaking from fear. I accidentally dropped my heavy metal flashlight. It hit a thick root with a loud thud. The entire forest reacted in 1 second. Heavy branches snapped downward like closing traps, narrowly missing my head. The dirt beneath my boots surged upward like a liquid wave, trying to knock me down and pin me to the earth. The whole valley was one giant, hungry animal. It knew a human was walking on its skin, and it wanted to crush me. I did not try to run upright. I dropped to my stomach and crawled into a thick patch of sharp briars. I moved like an insect, taking 2 quick steps, pausing, and then sliding sideways. I kept my movements totally random so the ground feelers could not track my pattern. The thorns ripped my face and hands open, but I did not stop. I crawled like that for an hour until I finally hit the hard gravel road. I stayed there on my hands and knees for several minutes, too afraid to touch the dirt again. My whole body was shaking, but the heavy thumping beneath the ground slowly faded into the distance. I am back home now, but I cannot go near parks or yards anymore. Whenever my shoes touch open dirt, my chest goes tight. My own heart instantly changes its rhythm. It starts beating in a slow, heavy thump that does not belong to me, matching something waiting deep under the grass. I was working deep in the northern woods, mapping out the trees. The forest was completely quiet. I stopped to look at a large pine tree right in front of me. I blinked my eyes once, and the tree instantly snapped 5 feet to the left. I shook my head and walked toward a big rock to get my bearings. As I walked forward, the rock moved backward. It stayed the exact same distance away from me, no matter how fast I ran. The woods were broken. The forest was failing to hold itself together, like a computer game crashing. Suddenly, the dirt beneath my boots flickered. For a second, the moss and grass disappeared, replaced by a flat, glowing gray grid made of straight lines. I looked up, and the trees turned into simple, smooth gray blocks with no leaves or bark. The world was running out of memory, and it was trying to trap me inside the glitch. A cold panic hit me. I knew that if I kept following the normal paths, I would get folded right into the broken code. I had to do something the forest did not expect. I closed my eyes completely so I could not see the fake landscape. Then I turned around and started walking backward into the dark, ignoring every trail. My boots tripped over roots that were not supposed to be there, but I kept moving blindly. After 10 minutes, my heel struck hard asphalt. I opened my eyes and found myself standing on the main highway. I got back to the city safely, but I am terrified to sleep. Every single time I close my eyes in bed, the darkness in my head disappears. I see that glowing gray grid pulsing slowly in the dark, just waiting for me to blink so it can pull me back in. I was walking through a quiet mountain valley when I saw a small gray bird in the air. Its wings were spread wide, but it was not flying. It was just floating in one place, like it was glued to the sky. I walked under it and looked up. The bird was not dead. Its little chest was moving fast, and its black eyes turned to watch me walk past. It just could not move a single feather. I took 3 more steps into the grass, and my own body went heavy. The air felt thick, like I was wading through a pool of cold honey. It took all my strength just to lift my boot. A few yards away, 2 deer were caught in the middle of a jump. Their legs were tucked up and their muscles were tight, but they were stuck hanging in the empty air. The whole valley was a trap. It was collecting living things and turning them into frozen statues. The cold feeling crept up to my hips. My legs stopped moving completely. I tried to pull my right foot up, but it felt like it was set in solid concrete. I knew that if I stayed still for 1 more minute, I would never move again. My chest grew tight, and the air left my lungs. With the last bit of energy I had, I opened my mouth and let out a loud, raw scream. The loud noise seemed to crack the thick air like glass. The pressure dropped for a split second, and my legs snapped loose. I stumbled forward, threw myself out of the valley, and hit the dirt trail on the other side. I made it back to my house, but I am ruined. I cannot sit still anymore. My fingers are always tapping, and my legs keep shaking. I am terrified that if I stop moving for even a second, the heavy stillness will creep back into my bones and lock me in place forever. I was working alone in a flat, empty field deep in the northern woods. The wind was completely still, but all the tall pine trees were moving. They were swaying left and right at the exact same time. A low, heavy thumping noise vibrated through the bottom of my boots. I took out my digital sound monitor and placed it flat on the dirt. The screen showed a massive, strange line that jumped every 6 minutes. It was a giant, living heartbeat. The entire forest was just a skin for a massive, living creature sleeping deep under the earth. The ground let out a sudden, loud pulse. The world around me instantly twisted. The long path ahead of me snapped tight, and trees moved into perfect square patterns like giant fence posts. The machine under the dirt was breathing, and its breath was changing reality. I knew that if I was caught moving during a pulse, my body would get crushed or trapped in the changing dirt. I had to run for my life, but I could only move in sections. I watched the clock on my wrist very closely. I would run as fast as I could for 5 minutes. Then, when the 6th minute came, I would freeze like a stone statue. The ground would shake, the trees would slide across the dirt around me, and the air would turn hot. I kept my eyes shut tight during the shake so I would not lose my mind. As soon as the pulse stopped, I opened my eyes and sprinted again. I did this for 3 miles until I finally hit the gravel road at the edge of the woods. I jumped into my truck and drove away without looking back. I am safe in my house now, but the nightmare is not over. I cannot sit in a dark, quiet room anymore. Whenever the house gets completely still, my chest starts to ache. My own heart stops its normal beat. It forces itself to thump in a deep, heavy rhythm that matches the creature under the northern dirt. I found a broken wood shack while hiking deep in the mountain woods. The roof had fallen in, and everything inside was covered in thick gray dust and old spider webs. Nobody had stepped inside for 50 years. I walked over to a rotting wooden table in the corner and saw a black leather notebook. I picked it up, thinking it was just an old diary from the people who used to live there. I flipped the pages open, but the dates at the top of each page were totally wrong. They were all written for years in the future. I flipped to the very last page with writing on it. The ink looked fresh and wet. I read the words out loud. It said that a man would find the book at exactly 4 p.m. It said he would read the page and then he would hear a footstep right behind his back. The last sentence said he would finally understand that something else had taken his place in the woods. My heart stopped. I slowly lifted my left arm and checked my watch. The hands pointed directly to 4 p.m. A terrible freezing cold washed over my neck. I went completely stiff. I was too terrified to move my head, but then a loud, heavy crack echoed through the room. A floorboard behind my back groaned under the weight of a heavy boot. Someone was standing right behind me. I dropped the book onto the dirt, threw my body forward, and sprinted out the broken door. I did not look back until I reached the safety of the thick tree line. When I finally turned around, the shack was gone. There was only a flat patch of gray rocks and weeds. I am back at home now, but I keep my doors locked tightly. Every time I walk through my house, I hear an extra footstep clicking on the floor right behind my heel, matching my pace perfectly.